What we're going to be talking about today, guys, is using a 3D printer with our pediatric patients and families. We're going to go through what some of the child life or therapeutic goals are when we do this, what it might look like, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll get into some of the more logistics and technical things. And if you have questions, put them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them as we get towards the end.
All right. Yeah, I can't see the chat, Siobhan, so just let me know if there's anything I can help answer.
I'll deal with that.
Who's this?
It's us. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Siobhan. I run the Hassenfeld Children's Hospital's TV studio, Skyline Studio. That's my primary role here in New York. As you can tell from my accent, I'm originally from Australia. I've been here for 5 years. I'm a certified child life specialist by trade, and I somehow ended up responsible for 100 iPads and about 95 gaming systems. And honestly, I want to say like a quick shout out to Child's Play and the Slack group we have, because everybody, so many of the people who are here present have been my lifeline, teaching me gaming things as I've tried to figure out what I'm doing and, you know, developing new technologies like having 3D printers in my studio.
And Lou Borges. I work here in Mount Sinai Children's Hospital. I've been here for, gosh, about 20 years now, working with the child life department, with the creative arts therapist and also child life specialist, doing tech and pretty much working with our clinical staff to experiment with, as new tech comes out, what is the value, the therapeutic value, the entertainment value, the distraction value with all the things that we have. How can we roll it out well? And I also work with our Kids on TV studio, our in-house CCTV studio, making sure that and helping the team really use what assets we could to kind of reach our population and maximize all these things, the resources that we have in a way that the kids really can engage with us.
All right, so I'm going to begin by talking about some of the child life or therapeutic benefits to using a 3D printer with patients. So the first thing is it gives patients an opportunity to learn a new skill and to become proficient at it. So sometimes this might be referred to as mastery, but it's giving kids that sense of, oh, I can do this really cool thing. And it might be something that they've seen at school. It might be something that they've never experienced before. And it can make them feel good about themselves in an environment where they often don't feel good about themselves. They might feel down about the fact that they don't feel well. They might be feeling bad about the way that their body looks might be different. And so this is something really positive that they can focus on. It also gives patients an opportunity for choice, lots of choices, in fact. So they can choose what they're making, they can choose what color it's going to be, they can choose what size it's going to be. They can also choose how involved they get in the process. We have some patients who simply say, oh, I want that wand from Harry Potter, and that's all they can choose. Like that's the limit to the decision-making capacity. We might have other patients who choose to model something in a 3D space. They pick the color, they want to be there helping me set up the 3D printer. They get it off, they're taking off all of the extra raft and support, and they really feel like they own the entire experience from beginning to end. So you might get some patients at one end, some at the other, and lots that are in the middle. It also gives patients a chance for creative expression, which, as we all know, is so important in the hospital environment. So that might be the designing, it might be choosing someone else's design, it might be, as you can see in the picture here, like modeling, and then it may also be what they do with that 3D print at the end. So I'll talk more about that, but making the 3D print is really just like one step in their creative expression. It may be something that they use to then build a larger art piece, for example. It also helps to normalize the hospital experience. As I said, it may be something that they've done at school, and it may be just something fun that they can enjoy that makes the hospital environment not about being sick, not about being injured, but actually about having fun and learning new skills and engaging with their peers. They may be like making something with someone else. And then finally, we also use 3D prints as a form of memory making. So Lou will definitely talk more about it. But when we make these prints that are symbolic or like, you know, sort of physical representations of our patients and their family members, that's something a family can keep forever, even if in the most unfortunate circumstances that patient passes away. We also have patients where they may want to do a model when they're unwell, and then maybe down the track they want to do another one, and their appearance may have changed, and that may be a really reflective moment for them. Next slide, please, Lou. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the projects I've done in my hospital, and then Lou will talk more in depth about some of the really cool stuff he's been doing. He's been doing this a lot longer than me. But I just want to say, first of all, you do not have to have a super complex, extensive technical background to do this. I had no experience with 3D printing when I started, and it really was just working with Lou, asking other people in the Slack channel for advice, and once you've practiced, it really is it's really easy to get going. So some of the things that I have made for with my families and for my team are medical preparation tools. So you can see here a very tiny MRI machine. We actually had a large wooden model that we used with patients, and then the hospital was told by the Joint Commission that we weren't allowed to use wooden preparation tools anymore. So I whipped up this little version, went to our radiology child life specialist and said, is this what you need? And she said, yes, just make it about 4 times bigger. I set the print. We used up a roll and a half of filament, and it took me about 18 hours, and we were able to make a decent sized MRI machine. To the right on that purple background, that's actually a model of a trach. One of my team were complaining that it was really difficult to source the actual item for preparation because they were expensive, and the team were really reluctant to let us have them to play with. I was able to find a 3D model online. I printed her out 6 of them, and that way she could have them to show patients, to put in dolls, and it's a fairly close representation. And yes, I have the STL for the MRI model. I'm happy to give it to people. And then in the middle there, you can see there's a kangaroo. I had a kangaroo toy in the studio, and a patient wanted it, and I wasn't willing to give it up. So I said, hey, how about I make you your own kangaroo? And he was thrilled with that. We also have, we work with, I work with other disciplines in the studio. So one of our chaplains actually runs a gaming show on Monday nights. And when we have patients call in and chat to us about the show, one of them, it was a Pokemon show. And so I said, do you have a favorite Pokemon? And they said, yeah, I do. And I said, okay, well, let's 3D print it. And so that's where the interaction began, and then it developed into the project. So we have legacy items. You can see on the right there is a patient model, and we also had twin boys. One had cancer, one was a well sibling. They each did a scan, and then we turned their little figurines into tokens for a board game that they'd been building with our art therapist. And when the well sibling went home, he would take his brother's token with him, and he would leave his token with his sibling. And that was like a little item that they had when they had to be apart, and then they would bring them back to the hospital together and play with them, which was really sweet. Lou, I'm going to hand it over to you.
I love those examples. Yeah, so it's such a unique way to be able to capture a family. And in the beginning, when we started, we really wanted to do legacy pieces and scans, hand holding, and do your traditional kind of like plastic versions of plaster cast pieces. At the time, the scanner that we had, it just didn't have the resolution to carry anything like that. So we moved. Ironically, we were concentrating on something so small that it was so easy to capture a bigger scope of what was happening in the room. So rebranded it a little bit to really make it a portrait project. Because the thing is that when you start with new tech that people really aren't familiar with, and you saw this back in the beginning with iPads and tablets, That in not understanding it, there was a little bit of like, well, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to say no. So framing it as a portrait project, a family portrait project, went a long way. People got excited about it. Families got excited about it. Having samples was another big plus, where we were able to, capture a very, very specific moment. Actually, our very first family scan is the one that you see there on the right, with the wood background, the desk background. It was a mom holding her child, which was rare at the time, difficult for her to do. And since then, we've completed 3 other scans that over time shows the child's progress. And she was extremely happy. Mom was extremely happy to have it. It really, it was a nice piece for people to have, also to be able to show their medical staff, to show their family, to show the doctors, and it encouraged interaction between other families when possible, and with the medical staff. Um, and it really gave, as Siobhan was giving an example, by being able to scan entire families or siblings, and being able to, have almost a mini chess set of your family members. It's just a great way to play, to do role play. In our dialysis unit, at one point, we had a patient that had 6 of her family members scanned, and when the father couldn't come as often, they had that figure, and they were traded off when they were coming in and out to visit. So the family portrait aspect of it is fantastic. There are the challenges to it, which we'll get into a little later. And I just want to show you this one quick video of a sibling that in the NICU was very, very bonded with his brother, and had a great experience. Let me make this full screen, where we're able to go into the NICU with the limitations of the space, perform the scan, and be able to give it to him a week later as a reveal. And it was just a great experience for all of them, and something that they've had after their NICU stay. Siobhan, can you still see this full screen? Or did it go into window one?
No, you're all good.
So of course, then our second kind of target population is teenagers. Teenagers are traditionally a more difficult group to reach. You tend to get a lot of no's, especially when your teens were here since before they were teens. They've done a lot of the activities, or they just have an interest in technology. It's a great opportunity for them to be very creative. The self-portrait is, as any art therapist could possibly tell you, it's a great project for teens because it invites a lot of reflection. So they can choose their pose, choose their location, do multiples of themselves, and even extend that to doing stories or stop motions of their with their own creations. Incorporating their own medical devices, as opposed to saying, I don't really want that, and then having a story to tell and share about that. It's also a great opportunity for teenagers to really engage them as somebody that's making all the choices. We're not carrying them along in an activity. They're making all the choices. And as a little more tech-savvy kids these days, they're more willing to jump in and to take a chance and to experiment and to learn. And the truth is that, this is one of those items that you can't really mess it up. You can make as many as you want. You can make as different poses as you want. You can make as many scans as you want. And then it becomes a really hands-on thing that becomes their own thing. One of the nice parts that I like is that you can use the medical tools to help break off the supports. The print does need to make supports for the parts that are kind of jutting out into the air to hold them up. So they get to use, my favorite is the scissor clamps to clamp and twist and break and hold and maintain the structure and make all the editing changes. It's turned into really collaborating with all of our staff. So if we have a pause and play, our specialist, and there's a patient that is celebrating a milestone, and they really want to incorporate themselves and the dog that they've been working with, we can create that print. The dog is a little hard to scan, but what we've been able to do is scan them a bunch of times, join and edit the scan, and then we have that as a standing file that any child can insert themselves into. And also, this is all digital. So long as you can get the files to kind of talk to each other, to be able to be edited in whatever editing software you use, you can bring things in from other programs. For example, we had a patient that was very into Minecraft and building things in Minecraft, and we were able to port in part of a landscape that she had created, and you can see it on the right center there, one of the trees in a house that she was building with a little cliffside. So there's kind of like not that many limits to the things that you can end up doing. Pictures can also be printed. 2D pictures can be converted into a 3D format. The teens, probably the richest kind of experience. And of course, staff. So being able to offer our child life and creative arts therapists a new tool set, and which they can participate in whatever level they're comfortable. We have some staff that just want to learn how to do all of it from A to Z, from the scanning to the editing to the printing to the cleaning up of files. It does allow a great connection with our other staff. For example, I scanned most of our nurses on one unit and created them, the print for them. They, for a while, were walking around with their prints and being able to show patients and actually recruiting for the project for us. But the enhancement to the staff and being more comfortable with these things and knowing that this is a real thing that they can offer has been great. Our NICU staff and our Hemon clinic staff now offer it as a standard milestone project option. Hardware and software, always the big question. So there are a lot of different printers that you can use. I'm going to talk to you specifically about the ones that I use. We've tried a couple, specifically the MakerBot that we got through a donation, Teammates for Kids. It works great. It's very stable. It's a kind of a workhorse. We use it very heavily. The Dremel, I believe, Siobhan, that's the one you use, right? I love the Dremel brand. That's coming just from an art background. Basically, the software that you need, so that's for the printing, right? The software that you need is going to be a big part of it, the utility app that comes with your printer. So the printer designers have written a piece of program that will communicate and translate whatever file you give it into a version that the printer can print out for you. So that you'll have to learn. But then there's also the editing app. So you can use Mesh Mixer, Blender, MeshLab. The ones that are listed here are all free, the editing apps. And there's a little bit of a learning curve, but you can watch a couple of YouTube videos. You can reach out to any of us, and we can walk you through some of it. It Sees 3D is the app that we use on the tablet that helps capture and translate that into a downloadable file that we can then edit. So It Sees 3D is something that offers subscriptions or per scan purchase. I think it's $7 or $8, but you can reach out to them and see if they can help support you or help cut that down. For me, in my experience, that's been the best and easiest, most direct way to scan. You can walk into a room, perform the scan, and by the time I'm out, I've already exported the file. There is Sconnect, which is something that you can plug into like a Windows or a Mac tablet that does it slightly differently. But if you have access to Apple tablet, I would just recommend that. And filaments, I tend to only use 1 or 2 filaments, but there are colors that you could buy. There's even rainbow prints, and there's glow in the dark, and all these different. There's harder and softer filaments that you can kind of experiment with. And I think I would really recommend, you have to have a dedicated space. There are, you could put the 3D printer on the cart to move it around, this kind of a maker space bot kind of thing. I find that everything works better when it's in a rigid location that you can level it and make sure that it's working properly. I would love to hear actually anybody else's experience with that. We actually featured it in our lobby. We have our TV studio that has a glass window. So anybody that comes in the lobby, they can see it. We feature it there, and it also helps attract attention to it. And there is a learning curve for everything, but all of this stuff is kind of made for maybe not standard end consumers, but anybody with an interest to be able to pick up and learn what kind of works for you. And there's a lot of video resources out there.
Yeah, in terms of my 3D printer actually is on a cart because I have a very small space and I needed the flexibility to be able to get it out of my way. But when I'm using it, that cart is locked, and I re-level before I do every print, and I've not had any problems. I just try to ask my team to not move it while I'm actually printing something. We're seeing a lot of great comments in the chat. So as Lou mentioned, with the scanning app, it does require a paid subscription, but they are very kind to us, and I personally spoke to them very sweetly, and was able to get the subscription for free. So, you know, I do believe that when you drop, I'm making things for the sick children in the hospitals. A lot of companies out there are very eager to support us, particularly like in my case, we're not using it a ton. I'm not making 10 prints a day. And so they are willing to work with you. So I do recommend reaching out to them and just seeing what they might be able to offer you. I think this is mine. So some things to keep in mind if you are new to 3D printing. It's very important to realize that it will take you some time, that learning curve. Staff who might be referring patients to you will not always be aware of just what kind of a time frame is involved. And people who aren't familiar with 3D printing might think, oh, you know, I'm going to offer it to this patient at 10 a.m. They're getting discharged at 3. That's plenty of time, right? And particularly in the early stages, and particularly if you are trying to do the kind of scan that Lou has shown you here, that might not be enough time. You might need more time than that. So it's really important to figure out, first of all, for you, how much time you need to go through the process, and then also figure out how you can communicate with your staff about what your needs are in terms of how much time you will need to complete a project, so that you're not feeling overwhelmed, and to give yourself some time for, sometimes prints go badly. Like sometimes something happens in the middle and you have to start from scratch, and you want to give yourself a nice buffer of time so you're not panicking about getting it done, because once that 3D print has begun, you have no control over how long it takes. If it's a 4-hour print, you need to wait the 4 hours for it to print. So that's just something to keep in mind. There are things you can do to make it easier, to make sure that you do have a successful print. Practicing with your particular printer and what file types seem to work best with it, checking that you have your raft settings or your support settings are correct, making sure that you're using the right filament, making sure that you have your 3D model is flat, that your 3D printer is flat. There are things you can do to set yourself up for success from the beginning. With the 3D printer, it does need to have an adhesion to the base of the printer. On mine, I literally just use a glue stick. On some, there are special pads. I don't know what you use, Lou, on yours.
We have like a blue tape. It's really like a large sheet of masking tape that has the one side textured, so when the plastic goes down, it grips it right away.
Yeah. So making sure that you get your print to adhere is going to set you up well, because if it doesn't adhere properly at that point, then you need to cancel and start again, because you really want a nice, clean, solid, flat base. You don't want it curling up or having imperfections. As I said, you need to check with your file type and compatibility. I use STL files. I know there are different types. I just find, like with the Dremel, that's what it seems to prefer. And in terms of considering the challenges of your patient spaces, I've realized in our patient rooms, it can be quite challenging to get a nice, clean amount of space around them for scanning. And so I find if I can take that patient to a playroom, it will make that process easier for me. It's not always possible, but keeping in mind things that might be over your head, I have done the old crouching down to get a nice under angle, stood up, whacked my head on something. So it can be really helpful if you, particularly in the beginning, if you have a coworker who can come and be your buddy and just keep an eye on you and make sure you're not going to trip over something, because when you've got that iPad and you're scanning, you are so focused on getting that scan correct that you can become completely oblivious to literally anything else in the environment. So I really think teamwork can be really helpful, particularly in the beginning until you're a bit more practiced. Considering your PHI requirements, you are making a 3D model of someone. I always get a consent form, particularly if I do want to use the model as an example or in education or to show other people. And practice. Don't don't believe that or assume that you're going to be able to make these models that Lou makes that are just incredible off like immediately. It takes time, it takes practice. I personally recommend starting with a model that you've gotten off Thingiverse, as is a great place to get free models, and you can see what they're supposed to look like. Start there, get really comfortable with your printer, and then do the kind of scanning modeling that we've got here as your like phase 2. That's my personal opinion.
I agree, and that's exactly what we did here, right? Because you don't really know what your printer's going to do. You don't really know what sound it's going to make or how long it's going to really take. So doing that, well, once you get comfortable with that, then you can kind of concentrate on the rest of it. One of the things that I've always tried to do is to include the staff in the entire process with tech. That means educating them a little bit. In this case, you can see I had one of the specialists who had an interest scan one of our other specialists, and for the purpose of trying different positions and learning what works great and what fails and so that in the room you can be a little more informed if somebody really wants to do a Superman pose and they're flying with both hands in the air, you have to kind of guide them a little bit to a print that will work better. But also, surprisingly, one of the things that I learned is by watching other people be the scanner, I learned how to not only teach how other people to scan, but also the errors that I was making. Some positions are better and the way that you're holding something is better. And for a while I was considering like putting a rope on the thing or something so I didn't drop it because I was but so watching people do it is also very, very helpful.
And I think starting with older patients or patients who do have like a greater capacity for sitting still when you're learning to scan, or once you've practiced on some of your coworkers, can also be helpful, because I decided to start with a 4-year-old, and that was a terrible idea. And they were not able to sit still long enough. And then I felt really terrible because I wasn't able to perform as well as I wanted to in that situation. We got it done eventually, but it did take a couple of scanning sessions before we were able to get like a decent scan. I also find that with the younger children, if you do busts of them, it's easier than trying to do a full body because it doesn't require them to sit still for quite as long. We can go on to the next one, and then I see some questions in the chat, and I promise I'm going to address them when we're finished.
All right, so it is new technology, right? So there is some considerations that you want to have when you're introducing the project to patients. First, you want to really be secure in what your workflow is and who your identified partners are, and educate them as to your staff on what to expect. And as Siobhan was saying, who to identify. There are some patients and some families that just will never be able to do this. If they're just too physically active, if they can't concentrate for the 3 to 5 to 10 minutes that it might take to do it, the specialist first line needs to know to not offer this, right? You don't want to get a referral that you just have to say no to. They can't even like investigate really. So it's important to do the hands-on experiment with them so they can both be the person on the receiving end and on the scanning end. It'll inform them as to the room and everything. How comfortable is the patient going to be? What is their capacity, as we were describing before? But also it matters that they're comfortable with you. So if it's a patient that I've already been working with on anything else, whether we've been doing gaming or really, studio, anything, I know they're going to be comfortable with me. I already have a relationship with them. If this is the first time I'm meeting them, a younger patient may not be comfortable with somebody, an old man coming in and doing the scan and holding this camera and, going up and down and left and right. So there's a little bit of education where you have to go in, make them very comfortable and assess, like, am I the right person to do this? Do I need to quickly refresh one of the specialists and have them do it? And really have both the patients, the families, and the staff have a very clear understanding of the timeline and make sure that they know that what the expectations are. We do plenty of scans when people are leaving in a day or two. That's not enough time, but we just set the expectation, like, we're going to let you know. I'm going to come back tomorrow if this scan doesn't look good, but we'll mail it to you. We'll get you your information, and everybody's usually fine. I have a little QR code here to one of the handouts that I give to my staff, so feel free to grab it. That's kind of like the details about things to consider. I just want to make sure that we're on time. So please read that information there. It'll talk directly about what your considerations are, when you're going to walk into a room, a suggested process about going and introducing and coming back. And if there's any questions on that, you can just email us.
All right, so while Lou was talking, I was busy writing down everyone's questions so I don't miss anything. So for those people who are like, okay, you've talked about like how amazing 3D printing is, but like, what does it actually involve? This is the very basic, brief outline of making a 3D print. So the first thing you need to do is you need a 3D model. So that is a digital file of the rendering of what you want to make. You can source these online. So Thingiverse is where I get like probably 85% of my models. You may be able to get some from the Slack group that we have. Sometimes people post files there. And then you can also create your own using the scanner to create those personal renderings, the 3D portraits, or like Lou's mentioned, you can pull them from places like Minecraft. So you need that file. You have to upload it into your personal 3D printer's software and prepare the model for building. Every program works differently. On my printer, what it asks you is to go through, it's sort of like, it does like a cleaning up process, and then it asks you if you want to scale it or rotate it. It'll ask you what kind of filament you're using. It'll ask you, do you want to make it take longer but have more fine detail? Do you want it to be really strong, or do you want it to be hollow? And there are things to consider, particularly in terms of like, how long have you got to make the print? How hollow do you want it? Do you want it to be a really solid item that isn't going to break? Or is it okay for it to be like with fairly large gaps between the parts on the inside? So once you make all of those decisions, the software is happy with the file that you have, you then need to prep your 3D printer. So you're going to plug it in, make sure it's connected to the internet. You're going to make sure it's level so that when it prints, it doesn't make the print wonky. And then you're going to make sure the base is clean and that you've got your adherence down, like in my case, the glue stick, or it may be like the blue tape. You've got to make sure you're happy with the filament, the color, that it's running, it's not blocked. And once you've got all of that prepared, then you can get the printer to start printing. I always monitor it, particularly in the beginning, for errors. You want to make sure it's adhered properly, that no little drips of filament have accidentally fallen into the print that they're going to get in the way. And then once it's started, I let it go. Someone was asking about emissions. The first time we got our 3D printer, I had all the doors open and I had my head in it because I was so fascinated. And after about 20 minutes of that, I started to feel a little nauseous. So I do not recommend doing that. Keep the doors on it closed and sit a little bit further away from it. You know, a few minutes is fine, but don't put your face in it for an hour. And then once your print is complete, then you need to remove it from the base plate, because remember, it will be stuck down. So I have a spatula. I also have cut-proof gloves because I let a coworker take a print off once and it didn't go so well. So now we have gloves. We have protective eyewear for those of us who are not glasses wearers. And once you've got that print off the base, you need to remove all the files and the supports, or rafts as they're called. And they're those things that the printer builds up in order to support part of the print that comes out. Because if you were trying to print at hand like this and you didn't have a support, the filament would simply drop to the ground and you would just end up with a mess. So it creates a very temporary base, like you've seen in Lou's pictures, and you just need to remove those with pliers. And then you can use sandpaper to file any raw edges. And that's it. I usually give it a clean at the end, and then it's ready for the patient.
And just a quick note, a lot of printers do have the ability for you to transfer the final edited file from your computer to the printer via thumb drive. For us, that's really important because our printer does not work well with our network here.
You can start.
So yeah, give yourself time, guys. This is it's not, the software and the process is not crazy. It's just going to be new to a lot of people. It is absolutely doable. You guys, as child life specialists, creative therapists, tech specialists, you've done much more complicated stuff. This is just about learning the process that works for you, learning what works in your space, in your time, experimenting with software. I mean, I would suggest try to stick to the free software. There's plenty of stuff you can buy. You don't really need it. Um, and just do a lot of practice. You have to practice each step, and to really let the people that you're working with, and especially administrators, you need their support. You need their understanding that these things will take time, not just the learning curve, but the print. A print takes hours for the most part if you're doing a significant print. And reach out to the people around you. Reach out to, certainly to Siobhan and I, the Slack group that Siobhan was mentioning. I don't know. I feel like there's like a million things we could say, but
Yeah. I know we're nearly out of time, Lou, and I do want to address some of these questions. So if you can go to our last slide. Our contact info is up there. Lou is honestly one of the most generous people you will meet on the planet. I'm also very happy to pass on any wisdom that I have gained from him and other people. So please reach out to us if we don't get to everything. But I'm going to very quickly see if I can address some of the questions we got. So Jordan asked whether or not anyone has tried doing a live stream of their 3D print for the patient. I have not personally done a live stream, but my printer does create a time-lapse video, and I often give that to the patient as a memento along with their 3D print.
we've done during our shows, we do, our studio is running almost all day. So if there's a patient that has an interest, we do set up a printer cam, and throughout every other show, we just have one little corner at picture in picture showing the print.
Nice. A few people were talking about humidity. I know this has been an issue, particularly for our friends a little further south than we are. I have personally not had that problem, but you do have to be mindful of the fact that if you are in a very humid environment, the filament doesn't really like that. And so trying to dehumidify your space and use those resin the little silica packets to preserve your filament is important. And the teams who are south of us who have had more problems with that may have some more suggestions for you. Andrew asked about emissions. As I mentioned, if you stick your face in it, it does not make you feel good. But if you use PLA, the reason we don't use resin and the reason we don't use some of those other filament types here is that I have found PLA to be a nice, safe product that doesn't require extensive ventilation. I tend to leave my printer, it's sort of sitting over here away from where I sit all day. But it's completely fine. We haven't had any issues with the hospital worrying about that. Have you, Lou?
Yeah, no, same thing. The PLA changed everything drastically. The previous printer that we had didn't use that. So once you put it there and put it in enough open space, it's fine. Like the regular circulating air in the room is sufficient.
And I was actually sitting under my vent just coincidentally. So Misty was talking about how long it takes to print a scan. So when it comes to any 3D printing, obviously it depends on how dense a print you're making. But Lou, how long would you say on average for your kind of people that are about that big?
Right. So the first thing to clarify is that the prints are not solid. If you've never seen the inside of a print before, it's easy to assume that it's a solid piece of plastic. It's not. It's got either a diamond or a honeycomb shape on the inside. That's because it doesn't really need to be that strong, and it saves time, and it certainly saves you material. Something at about 6 to 8 inches could take about, I'd say pretty much it's like an hour an inch is my guideline. I do 2 shells, which means that the outside of the print is pretty thick, and then I feel like I can reduce the inside. So yeah, I'd say 6 to 8 hours for a standard action figure size print.
And I think there was a second question about printing overnight. I have absolutely left prints to print overnight. Sure. No issue with that at all. My MRI machine stopped halfway through the night because it ran out of filament, and it just waited for me. And in the morning, I put new filament in, and we just kept going with it.
Yeah, and the printers are really good that way, actually. They're very good at managing the prints.
Yeah. Oliver had a question about a LiDAR scanner for the iPad. That's what Lou was talking about earlier. The Scan Connect, it's got a separate scanner that you attach to your iPad. It does have to be a relatively new model. I think mine's from like 2017, but it doesn't use the scanner in the iPad itself. Lou's showing everybody.
This is the separate.
A little attachment. Yeah.
It's an attachment. So you do, like Siobhan, you do need, you want the newest iPad you could possibly get because it does do a fair bit of processing, and you don't want errors or.
Yep. And then Madison asked a question about grants. So I know that Child's Play does offer equipment grants. We were lucky enough to receive one this year for a laser scanner printer thing, which I'm very excited about. So they're one opportunity, but often we actually got the funding for our 3D printer from Encourage Kids. And there are many organizations that this is the kind of thing that organizations love to fund because it's tangible, it's physical, they can see what it is you are wanting to fund, and the ongoing costs are fairly minimal. The filament is about $35 for a roll, but you don't go through it super quickly. That's my experience. Lou probably goes through it faster than me.
It lasts longer than you think, actually. They're decent sized rolls, and if you find what balance works for you in terms of the infill, you can really stretch it out. But yeah, and the nice thing is that you can have different groups support different parts. The printer itself is pretty significant. The scanner and the iPad. You can get a smaller group to just get you the iPad and the different one for the scanner, and it works.
I can see there are a few more questions, but I also want to be mindful that we don't run over. So I highly recommend for those of you who are in the Slack channel to put questions there, to contact us directly. Lou and I are both happy to answer any questions you have. I want to say thank you so much for having us today. I know it's not quite gaming, but gaming adjacent, and it was my pleasure to present with you, Lou.
Yeah, same here. Always love spending time with Siobhan in any way, even this way. But yeah, any questions, please let us know. It's possible that in the fall, here at Sinai, we're going to do some kind of a tech workshop, which we had done a little bit in the past. So if you're interested, just send me an email and I'll send you the brochure for it if anybody wants to give it a shot. But yes, always, all the time, open for questions. Just reach out.
Highly recommend Lou's workshops. Definitely worth the money.
Good plug there. Siobhan and Lou, you guys are amazing. Thank you for that awesome session. So appreciate it.